Okay, now we're up to lesson 2, and let's start. We're looking at the planets in this lesson, and this is a fantastic picture to show their size in scale, and just how big the Sun is and Jupiter relative to all the other planets. Just an amazing picture to look at. So let's have a look at the planets. Were always considered to be gods. In all myths and religions of the past, the ancients were looked upon as gods, and at night they would watch their gods transverse the skies as stars and planets, and that's where they'd be watching them. And you got to think of it, that's all they had, the night sky, and what their planets, their interaction, and where they got all their stories and their myths. Now, these names, the planets were known in different cultures with different names, but they all had the same attributes. So here I'm basically concentrating just on the Greek and the Egyptian names, but there are so many that I haven't put in here. Anyway, the sun was known as Apollo in Greek and Horus in Egypt, and the moon is Diana in Greece and Isis in Egypt, so you can just see the rhythm. Mercury was also Hermes, the messenger, and Thoth. Venus was Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Mars was Ares, the god of war. Jupiter was Zeus, and Jove, that's where we get the word jovial from, and the Roman heavenly father. Saturn was Satan in the Bible and Cronus. Uranus was the sky god with his thunderbolt. Neptune was a Poseidon, god of the seas with his trident, and Pluto was the god of Hades in the underworld. Now here are the planetary cycles. You saw their scale, and because of their scale and their size and relationship to the sun, they have different revolutions. So the moon is 27.3 days. Mercury is 88 days. Venus is 224.5 days. The Sun Earth is 365.25 days. Mars is 687 days. Jupiter is 12 years. The lunar nodes is 18.6 years. Saturn is 29.5 years. Uranus is 84 years. Neptune is 165 years. And Pluto is 248 years. Now we'll get more into these cycles as the lesson progresses. Now we need to know what each planet means in terms of astrological principles that have been passed anciently to us. And what I'm going to do here is just give you some key words. Now the astrology is all about symbolism, and just learning a couple of key words for each of the planets, and like we did for the zodiac signs, is when you start getting a feel for them. Also, you need to be looking at the symbols as you go through the slides. Look at the symbol for each of the planets and just memorize them. You know, what I get a lot of my students to do is to actually have them printed out and displayed somewhere where they see them every day, either by the computer, or some people like to do it, you know, wherever you're going to have it, on the fridge, or you can think of other places, and just look at them every day and just memorize them, and maybe even have a key word next to each of them. So the moon, the key word for the moon is obviously emotions. Now the attributes for the moon are the female principle, instincts, fertility, the mother, the wife, gut feelings, moods, nurturing urge, and domesticity. And the physical traits, meaning the parts of the body, the moon is the breasts, the stomach, and the glandular secretions. Isn't it funny when you have an emotional upset, it's that first thing is in your stomach, you know, your solar plexus, around there where you get that gut feeling, and the moon controls the stomach and that rules cancer, and it all has to do with your stomach. Let's have a look at Mercury now. Mercury is to do with intellect, and this is all to do with the mind, and you can see his little symbol up there, these little horns. Remember, he was a horn messenger. And the attributes for Mercury are communication, our reasoning ability, short trips, siblings, relatives, writing, trade, media, and transportation. Now he was a messenger because he was so close to the sun. He's always sort of looked upon as being the messenger between the sun and the other planets, moving back and forth all the time. And the physical traits for Mercury, because it's all to do with communication, it's to do with the brain, the nervous system, our hands and arms, and our speech and hearing organs. Now, another reason we need to learn about the symbolism of these planets, as I've said before, is if you do want to tackle tunnel through the air, you'll need to know these words and these symbolism, because Gan's actually telling you through the characters. You've got to think of the characters maybe like planets. He's trying to tell you through the things that happen to them that they actually might be a planet. So, you know, like the main character often breaks his arms and hands. So that you've got to know these sort of things so that you can start putting the pieces together if that's what you want to do. Okay, so Venus. Here we have the symbol of Venus. Sorry, my cursor, there it is. And Venus has to do, she was a goddess of love, so it's all to do with love, our loved ones and affection, okay? And it's also to do with money and things that we value. So let's have a look at the attributes. Love, sense of values, beauty, charms, loved ones, arts, culture, luxury, physical attractions, possessions, and finances. Now, in terms of the body, we're looking at the throat, the kidneys, ovaries, veins, sense of taste and touch. Now, if you find you're looking at someone's chart and they have Venus rising, it often makes them very beautiful. So the sign that's if in the first house or rising has an influence on our body. Remember, the ascendant is to do with the rising point, and it's also the beginning of our life, and it shows the way we look, our appearance and our body when we were first born. Now let's have a look at the sun. The sun is like it is the center of the solar system, has to do with our vitality. It's a center of our existence. So attributes for the sun are male principle, willpower, our conscious aim, the father, the husband, illumination, inner self, energy, ego, and personality. Now the body traits on the body, we've got the heart, the upper back, circulation, and the body in general. Now, if you have any planet that is actually next to your sun, conjunct your sun, it will actually modify the expression of your sun. So that we'll get more into that when we do aspects, but your sun is very important in your chart, of course. Now, Mars is, the key word is action. Now, Mars was a god of war, and you can see the symbol, it looks like a sword. It often has to do with war and weaponry things, and it cuts. A lot of surgeons and that cut have to do with Mars. Now, Mars attributes war, desire, sexual energies, force, courage, surgery and operation, accidents, iron and steel, initiative, and animal nature. So it's a very male sort of energy, and that's a symbol for male. The physical traits is all the muscular system, the head and face, red blood cells, our motor nerves, heat of the body, and sexual functions. Now, isn't it interesting? You'll see a lot when you're doing charts, if you do have Mars rising or it's up on her ascendant, a lot of those people do actually have either a scar on their face or have red hair, because Mars was a red planet. So there's all that sort of things when you're looking at ascendant. And in the olden times, that's what they used to do, looking at your ascendant to see how you would look. You know, the bodily appearance would be that rising point. Now, Jupiter is, you saw in the scale, such a huge planet, the biggest planet, and of course it has to do with expansion. And so the attributes are wealth, big business, higher mind, long distance travel, love of animals, opportunity, philosophy, religion and spirituality, law and adventure. The physical traits are to do with the liver, the gallbladder, the hips, thighs and pancreas. Now, Jupiter has, I've seen a lot of people who have Jupiter on their ascendant. They've got really long, either big feet or long arms, a big torso. There's something that's big about them. So the only bad thing about Jupiter is it can exaggerate things, and if you're having a Jupiter transit and it's going over your ascendant, your body, you tend to put on weight. So you know, it can expand, it expands whatever it contacts. So it's interesting. Now, Saturn's complete opposite. Saturn restricts and is discipline, you know. He was known as the Grim Reaper sort of imagery and old Father Time. So he's a teacher. You know, if you're into the tarot and you've ever looked at the tarot, you see the card of the hermit carrying his light. It's very much like that. So the attributes of the teacher: limitations, sorrow, delays, responsibility, wisdom, structure, tradition, and older persons. Now, the physical traits are to do with the skin, skeletal system, which is including the teeth, the ligaments, the knees, and aging. Isn't it interesting that, you know, you're supposed to lose your first set of teeth at around 7, and that's the first time Saturn does a square in your chart, which we'll learn about. So every 7 years you'll have a square of Saturn cycle, and this is where we're doing our teeth. You know, there's that 7-year sort of cycle in our development, and also the 7-year itch. So it's very interesting when you look at how these planets and our natural cycles are all connected. Okay, let's go to Uranus, and this is the planet of awakening. When they discovered Uranus, it was all to do with the time of the revolution, so the planet takes on the energy of whatever was happening when it was discovered. Now, the attributes are changes, revolution and rebellion, eccentric, breaking the status quo, freedom, inventions, futuristic, technology, and the unexpected. Now, the physical traits is all to do with the higher nervous system, the body electricity, your ankles, and the membranes of your brain. And again, talks about all these inventions in tunnel through the air, and he talks about how he can work out what invention's going to come up because of this sort of planet, whatever sign Uranus is in, he could predict what new inventions would come up. It's interesting when you get into it, you'll see why it becomes so exciting. Now, Neptune, we can see the god of the seas and his trident there, and it's all to do with intuition, mysticism, dreams, illusions and fantasy, music and movies, maritime matters, deception, psychic sensitivity, drugs. No boundaries like the sea. There's no boundaries when Neptune's involved, which you can get into, you can get quite lost. Now, the physical traits are the spinal column, the feet, pineal gland, infections and paralysis. Last one is Pluto, which is transformation. You can be quite deep and profound. Attributes are power, obsession, investigations, death and rebirth, the underworld, secrecy, the occult, waste and corruption. A physical trait, it's all to do with elimination and reproductive systems, pituitary gland, abnormal growths like warts. So there are keywords for all the planets, which over time you should slowly be learning them. And you know, the good thing about this presentation is you can just keep going over and over again. Now here's just a summary of the planets. So the summary: the sun, the symbol, our vitality; the moon, emotions; Mercury, intellect; Venus, affection; Mars, action; Jupiter, expansion; Saturn, discipline; Uranus, awakening; Neptune, intuition; and Pluto, transformation. Okay, here we come to the topic of market mass psychology, how the planets affect the markets. Now, when I meet traders, that's the first thing they ask me: how is it possible, Olga, that the planets can affect the markets? And, well, we've got to think of it, you know, the planets have got such an influence on the magnetic fields of the Earth, and this has been proven scientifically. And also, you know, anciently it was known that planets would affect weather patterns, and we can see that now as well, and also affects the radio waves. You know, it's so important in terms of how we are affected. Our bodies, think of our bodies, we are just energy. Nearly 75% of our body is water. So just like the moon pulls the tides with the oceans, it pulls our inner tides. And there'll be times when the moon's full, especially, and you know, when it's full, strange things happen. People become more irrational, over emotional. We get more lunatics, which comes from the word loon. Lunar comes from luna, in Italian, and we get the lunatics. There's more rapes and murders. People are just over emotional, and these over emotional periods can also affect, obviously, the market trends. And also, if we're looking at weather patterns, they were able to predict in the ancient times floods and droughts. So that would obviously influence the supply and demand of commodities. And so Gam was very much into weather forecasting and understanding when there would be this flooding and drought, because he could obviously work out and forecast which way it was going to go. So you can see how amazing it is using the planets to forecast the markets. So every day is a balance between the bulls and the bears. So we've got buyers and sellers. We've got this duality every day. And again, they have to rely on the emotional side. Are they feeling happy and sort of wanting to buy, or fearful and cautious? And we get that duality. And this is reflected in the bar chart. So we've got a bullish bar, which the close is higher than the open, and the bearish bar, which the close of the day is lower than the open. And I know most of you traders know that, but just in case there's someone who doesn't, just looking at the duality between these bars as well, that constant pull every day between the bulls and the bears. Now, there's again a little snippet out of Gann's annual forecast of 1921. And if you look at the dates, we've got a cycle of talking about high, low, high, low. So it's a constant up and down, up and down. But if you look at the dates, you'll see that they're approximately 7 days apart. And he says that those dates given will not always mark extreme high and low, but some kind of rally or decline might be expected around these dates. So what I've done on the next slide is actually plotted these moon phases on the DJ, Dow Jones, in 1921. So he was doing a 7-day cycle, up and down, up and down, up and down. And you'll be able to look at these slides again when you can go back and forward, and you can see that a lot of the new moons are the black dots and the full moons are just the circles. At those times, you can see that there actually is a change in trend. Now, this is weekly charts, so you won't see as much in terms of if you're doing it on a daily chart. Now, a more recent one with moon phases, I've put on the S&P 500 on the daily. You can see that from the full moon to the new moon, which is the waning phase, has been quite bullish. These 3 times going up, and opposite in the waxing phase has been quite bearish. So in itself, it looks like a wave, you know. There's waves of people emotionally trading the market. So you can see how amazing just using the moon to trade can help you as a trading tool, and I've seen it quite efficiently with many traders who use it every day with their technical analysis. If they're using Gann fans, or they might be using a moving average or a MACD or volume, it's just an added tool. Astrology is an added tool. It's not something you would rely on it in itself. Okay, you've got your other analysis to back you up. So this is a composite of the moon phase on the daily S&P 500, which is put out by Time of Solution. And what it does is actually tries to get a composite, meaning a few cycles, and putting it together and trying to get an average, which is the moon phases is absolutely awesome tool that I love to use. And I just wanted to show it to you how this can be used in your trading as well. And you can pretty much come up with this sort of things by watching the lunar cycle on your trading charts. Even if you plot it for a year, which I did it myself, I kept a calendar. Every day I would watch what would happen. I would notice the phase and just record it and just keep it an observation myself to see how reliable it was and if I could use it to forecast. Now, again, the markets are controlled by people and their emotions. So some days we have, on a mass level, there is more optimism and willingness to buy, which is yang energy. And on other days, the feelings change to conservation and protection of profits, with more sellers taking control, and that's known as yin energy. So again, we've got positive and negative. Now, in terms of cosmic energy, this positive and negative balance between energy, we're talking about two planets mainly. There's Jupiter and there's Saturn. Now, they were known as the timekeepers, and all sort of mundane forecasting was done using their cycle, which is their synodic cycle, is a 20-year cycle, and again had a 20-year master forecasting cycle. So we're not going to get into depth into that. That will be for future lessons, but this is just the beginning for you to understand. We have two planets whose energy is pretty much completely opposite, and that's why I've got that yin-yang symbol in there so you understand this. Now, remember from our key words, Jupiter is the planet of expansion, and Saturn is the one of discipline and restriction. They're totally opposite, okay? So let's look at Jupiter. Jupiter is expansion, inflation, euphoria, optimism, prosperity, wealth, and wastefulness. Can exaggerate. Now, Saturn is opposite: depression, restriction, conservation, caution, contraction, fear, and panic. So you can see what we're dealing with here. Now, in terms of forecasting, these two planets are the most important for long-term cycles. Now, this is a quote from the Bible: "The Lord hath called for a famine, and it shall be upon the land for 7 years." It's a little snippet out of Gann's commodity course, where he actually mentions a planet, and the planet, of course, is Saturn. I'll read a little bit more. "Everything has a major and minor, and in order to be accurate in forecasting the future, you must know the major cycle, as the most money is made when extreme fluctuations occur. The major cycle of stocks occurs every 49 to 50 years. A period of the Jubilee year of extreme highs or low prices lasting from 5 to 7 years occur at the end of the 50-year cycle. 7 is the fatal number referred to many times in the Bible and is ruled by the planet Saturn, which brings about contraction, depression, and panics. 7 times 7 equals 49, which is shown to be a fatal evil year causing extreme fluctuations." Now, this is a number 7 that I've mentioned before about our teeth and things that happen to us every 7 years. That's a square from Saturn, which we'll learn about more. Now, these little quotes that I've got here, again, about the planets, is from a book called Astrology of the Old Testament by Carl Anderson, and it's one of the books that Gann has on his reading list. And I absolutely love it. It's quite a thick book. It goes through everything, the symbolism in the Bible. If you want to go in that direction, I would highly recommend it. So he talks about Saturn delights in dark and gloomy places, in the shade, wilderness, and the woods. He is the author of all evil under the sun, the greater infortune, and is Satan of the Christian religion. He delights in the east quarter of the heavens and causes miserable, foreboding east winds. Now, a quote from the Bible: "Though he be fruitful among his brothers, an east wind shall come. The wind of the Lord shall come up from the wilderness, and his spring shall come dry, and his fountain shall be dried up. He shall spoil the treasure of all the pleasant vessels." So you can see that Saturn was related to the east wind. So part of the Bible decoding, which is another one of my passions, is working out, because the planets all had corners of the earth that they ruled and winds they had what they inflicted on the earth. And so there's a lot of decoding you can go in there, and I've just put a quote to show you what I'm sort of doing myself. Now, if we look at the Saturn cycle on, actually this is plotted against the Dow Jones from 1885, what it shows is actually 4 overlapping Saturn cycles, and it reveals a specific trend according to the zodiac's position of the Saturn. So the zodiac positions are here, and we've got this curve. And then what it's done, it's overlapped the 4 cycles and tried to give you a common commonality point, I suppose, in the cycle. Now, when you see the red spots, that's actually showing you that there's a lot of synchronicity in that point, and also here. But you can see the low points in Gemini and Cancer, and then in sort of Libra, Scorpio area, and we get these peaks in Sagittarius and Capricorn, and then in this Aries and Taurus. So you're having this information, having this analysis, you can actually then forecast using this cycle, and this is just one cycle. Obviously, one cycle is not enough. You need to bring in more planets, and then you can make a composite. And then slowly you get an idea of what is coming up. And at the moment, Saturn's just moved into Libra. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Now we come to Jupiter. Jupiter is a great fortune, the author of all good and good gifts. He was known by the ancient Hebrews as Jehovah, the Creator and Heavenly Father. He delights in being near altars of churches and courts of justice. He is the one who makes the thunderstorms and purifies the air. He governs the north wind and the element of air. So a passage from Exodus. And Moses stretched forth his rod towards the heaven, and Jehovah sent thunder and hail, and fire ran down onto the earth, and Jehovah rained hail upon the land of Egypt. This is the Jupiter cycle now. I've plotted a Jupiter cycle which is 11.86 years, and it's usually rounded off to 12 years, and shows 5 overlapping cycles on the Dow Jones from 1885. And we can see that there's high zones in the Taurus and low zones in mid-Leo. And you can see how the Jupiter cycle has to do with expansion. And it's interesting that there will be periods where it meets with Saturn. And how do they sort of, you've got this expanding cycle and you've got this restricting cycle, and how they work with each other is such an interesting research that I've been doing quite a lot of, and a lot of people do when they start doing this sort of analysis, and it's so amazing. Now we get to Mars. Mars rules and rejoices in all matters of violence and war, the less in fortune or evil, author of quarrels, strife, and contentions. He stirred up the west wind. In Hebrew, Mars was called Ash-Lesh, the flaming star. Another passage from Exodus. And the Lord turned a mighty strong west wind, which took away the locusts and cast them into the Red Sea. There remained not one lotus in all the coast of Egypt. And isn't it interesting that Mars is the red planet? And in this passage, we got the west wind and the Red Sea. You can see how that's all related. Now, the Mars cycle is 687 days. And so this is plotting quite a few cycles. I mean, over those years, there's actually 65 cycles, but it's only going to pick about 5, I think, in this zone. So this statistically is showing a high zone in Aries, which is the sign it rules, and some lower areas here in Capricorn. Okay, so that's another interesting cycle. Now, the sun by the ancients was called many names. We've got Osiris, Ra, Bel, Brahm, Abram, Jah, Baal, Sol, and the Lord of Hosts. The sun is invariably the ruler and represents kings, emperors, presidents, and all those highest in authority. His greatest strength is in the sign of Leo, the Lion of Judah. His exaltation is in 19 degrees of Aries, the Lamb of God exalts the Father. In Hebrew, the sun was called Ash-Shed, to pour forth, literally to shed forth rays of light or fire, from which we get Shaddai, the name of God. Now in Revelations, and one of the elders said unto me, weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof. This is the sun's annual cycle. Now, the annual cycle, we're looking at a low point here when we get into Libra and Scorpio. And that is known, that's sort of the bearish period when we get into that period that we know of. And then we go up again into Capricorn. So that's interesting. We'll do more of this later on. And our Venus, by the ancient Venus, was called Alhusa, Astarte, Hesperus, Lucifer, Queen of Heaven, Goddess of Love and Pleasure, and Hathor. She is the author of all that is beautiful, of love, pleasure, music, and all things artistic. She governs the south wind, being hot and moist. A passage from Isaiah. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Now, do you know how Lucifer became Satan and had nothing to do with Satan, because actually Lucifer was the bright morning star, which was Venus. Venus is either the morning star or evening star. Somehow things get lost in translation over the years and get changed. So we need to sort of have a look at those things. This is a Venus cycle. It doesn't show as many hot spots. It's only got a period that it's in Venus, and that's its sign of exaltation. So that's interesting in itself, that it's got a hot spot there. Now, the planet Mercury was called Hermes, the horned or the winged messenger of the gods. By the ancients, he was known as Buddha, the Messiah, or the messenger. He rules over thought, intellect, and reasoning powers. As he never gets far from the sun and never seen except at twilight or early daybreak, he was truly dwelling in the bosom of the Father. Thus he sat on the right hand of the Father. He delights in windy, stormy, violent, and boisterous weather. Acts 14:12, and they called Barnabas Jupiter and Paul Mercurius, because he was the chief speaker. Remember, Mercury has all to do with communication and speaking. So there you go, there's a direct passage in the Bible. Mercury cycle, we've got a hot spot in Leo coming down here. So with these smaller cycles, because there's so many of them, it's very hard to get long-term, especially if you've got all this data. You're not going to get a lot of agreements between the cycle because there's so many of them. But you can use these smaller time cycles if you're using just less data and you want to see smaller short-term trading. So the moon, the crescent or the arc of the moon was anciently called Isis or Esses, Luna, Heavenly Mother, the Ark of Argo, the Virgin Mother or the Virgin Mary or Mari. She governs over the seas and tides and the clear and virgin pure water. Of wind she delights in the north and usually stirs up the winds according to the nature of the planet she next applies to by aspect. A passage from Isaiah, and it shall come to pass that from one moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. It's interesting that the other character in Tunnel Through the Air, the main character is Robert Gordon, and he loses his beloved Marie, and so here we have the name Mary or Maria or Mary, all coming from the moon. And here we have the moon cycle, which is 27.32 days, and again it's showing a sort of a low point in Gemini and Cancer, and high point in this zone and lower. Now again, with the lunar cycle, a lot of data is going to give you too many cycles to analyze, so you need to sort of narrow it down to small time trading.